Long Meadow Ranch, what an impressive place. I mean, we did a little research online. There's so many things going on. And this seems like these virtual tastings are just a small part of what's going on at Long Meadow Ranch.
You know, with our virtual experiences, sometimes I like to sort of settling in and giving a little flyover of our home property to give us a sense of place, because obviously we would love to be with you here physically in Napa Valley. But in lieu of that, I thought show drone footage, and through that we can get into some of the history and storytelling and talk about the wines. Ted and Laddie Hall and their son Chris purchased this property in 1989. Inside that building is our winery and also our frontoio, our olive mill, our stone olive mill. And now we're going up even higher to about 1,200 feet up. And this first vineyard we'll see peeking over the crest is our first Cabernet Sauvignon vineyard. And right now we're facing due east. And now we just swung around and now we're facing west. The same Cabernet vineyard swinging around. And now we're again flying over. And now it's over about a 30-year-old vineyard. And then now we're going to drop right into Napa Valley. And so this really gives you perspective of where we're at. So for example, up to the north, to the left is St. Helena, and then down to the south in the valley floor, that's Rutherford, and that's where our Rutherford property is. And this just gives us a quick sense of place. You can see some olive groves there and the home winery peeking at the bottom left. And so that's a kind of a quick sense of place. And I think that's a good place to start, because in 1989, when they bought the property, there wasn't much up there except that it was an abandoned ranch. The ranch dates back to the 1870s. And so the founder of that first property, E.J.Church, whose namesake is on our reserve cab, but he had this thriving ranch. There was vineyards up there, cattle, olive grove, really diverse ranch. But of course, you think about what happened in the turn of the century and then the first 20 or 30 years, right? We had Prohibition and the Great Depression. And probably a third generation at that point for that family. And so they sold it off into parts. It went into disarray. No vines were left when we got up there. But one key thing that was up there, and we'll show you some photos in a moment, there was an olive grove deep in the overgrowth of the forest. And the olive grove didn't die off. Olive trees actually are quite resilient. They won't bear fruit if they're blocked from the sun, but they will survive. There's enough water in the water table there. So we cleared out that old grove and it still produces fruit. We also propagated the trees, restored their health, and we make incredible extra virgin olive from those trees and from the younger trees. So that's sort of a little snapshot of what was happening right when we got there. And I'll pause for a second. I'm sure there's probably a question or two that might be sparked.
So the olive oil, that's mainly purchased from the ranch, or is that distributed in other stores around the country, or how is that distributed?
Yeah, so it's quite limited, and it seems every other year we get kind of a large and then a small harvest, which is quite typical of olive trees. And for us, we make so little, so we sell it only direct to consumer on our website and at our tasting rooms and at Farmstead. And our club members get early access as well. And then we have maybe like one or two retailers around the country that truly know about it and love it and want to sell it. So we'll do that, but it's not in the typical 3-tier distribution system.
And when is harvest for the olive grove?
So that's what's kind of cool. So at Long Meadow Ranch, as practitioners of full circle organic farming, which is really about all the parts connect, right? So one part's input is the output of another. So for example, the olive harvest happens about 10 to 3 weeks after the grape harvest, really, year to year, but it's usually just after. So usually like mid-November, early to mid-November, we're harvesting olives. So our vineyard team can finish the grape harvest and then move on to the olive harvest. So it's our same team that have kind of gainful employment year round because of all of the farming we do. And what's also cool about the olive farming, and it's a really integral part of full circle farming, when you make olive oil, the output is one of the things that we can then use in our compost. So what I mean by that is when you pulverize the whole olive, the pit and everything, you start making it into a paste. And then as it oscillates, you're separating out the liquids from the oil. And that liquid resulting is basically a vegetable water. It's a high in nitrogen vegetable water. And that water can go into our compost system, which is great because you want nitrogen in your compost. especially for the vineyards, right? That's why fava beans are such a great cover crop for a lot of farming and regenerating the soil with nitrogen. So we have that input into our compost pile, which has already been hugely, huge growth to the compost because of all the pumice after harvesting the wine. So now we throw in that vegetable water and all the extra solids and wastes and go into that. So it's a really an integral part of the composting and farming at Long Meadow Ranch. Really, each part benefits the other. Other things that are happening up there on that property, and I'm going to show you a couple things now. Let me go over to my other presentation because I want to show you a couple of things that I think are kind of cool up there that are worth sharing up on that property. And this sort of gives a highlight, right? We're family owned, as we talked about, Ted and Laddie and their son, Chris Hall. We're farmers, we're winemakers, we're chefs, we're a great, great big team, and we respect the people, the animals, the land, and all of our customers. And so within the Long Meadow Ranch family, of course, it's Long Meadow Ranch. We know Stony Hill came into the family a couple of years ago, and then Hunt and Harvest, our smaller brand, mostly out there in the restaurant and retail world, and of course, Farmstead. And we just showed you this property, and to give you perspective, as this slide shows, that ranch up there, we only got a tiny little smidge of that in that drone, but it's over 650 acres, most of which is forest. And then 16 acres of vineyards, 11 acres devoted to olive orchards, and we have our bulls that live up there. This is, of course, all of the north coast of California. And as we go in a little bit, you can see that we've got the Napa Valley is all in orange, of course. And then within that, this little area right here that I'm coloring in red, that is not shaded dark orange. It's light orange because it's not a sub-AVA. So all the orange, the dark orange are sub-AVAs in Napa Valley. So you've got things like Diamond Mountain in the north, then Spring Mountain right below it, right there. And then that light orange is this stretch of the Mayacamas Range before you get down to Mount Veeder, the southernmost sub-AVA on the Mayacamas Ridge. So we are in between Spring Valley and Mount Veeder appellations. And it never got a sub-AVA in part because of the Rutherford AVA down in the bench and in the valley, right? So the Rutherford sub-AVA stops at 500 feet up the mountain. So it's very interesting. So in a sense, this sort of like no man's land is very similar, terroirs to Mount Veeder and Spring Mountain, but it got stuck in the sort of no man's land of the sub-AVA world. So we refer to it as the Mayacamas Mountains, right? You think about that area, it's just the Mayacamas Ridge. And the other side of that is Glen Ellen over in Sonoma. And so that's where that property is. And then eventually we'll talk about the Anderson Valley up here in the green in Mendocino when we talk about the Rosé and our Pinot Noir and Chardonnay production. We talked about full circle farming a little bit, all the different things that come together at Long Meadow Ranch. And this idea that each part contributes to the other, right? So we talked about the olives and the olive oil, the grapes and the wine, of course, and we'll talk about these other parts as we go through. Now, I'm going to get to the mountain. So that vineyard we flew over in Bear Canyon, that's one of the vineyards just to the side. That's about a third of an acre vineyard on the left there. And this was taken by our winemaker back on May 29th as the season was getting going. And you see these huge, healthy leaves, the organic farming in full swing. And you can see the start of a new vintage. And then this shot I took in January, and obviously a dormant season right before pruning. And that's that plateau vineyard that we flew over as well, about 1,200 feet up. And this vineyard, again, planted in 1990, 1991, the whole thing, it took a couple rounds. And we've done some repositioning in that vineyard, some retrellising to give it some more health, creating great, vibrant fruit. And so we're really happy that after about a 25-year mark, we made some changes without having to do any replanting. And so that goes back to the sustainability of Long Meadow Ranch, and not just organic and not just sustainable. They all go hand in hand, right? So sustainability is not only about farming, it's about economic sustainability and long-term sustainability. So we were able to not rip up a vineyard and burn things and create CO2 emissions. Instead, we were able to reposition and retrain some vines to have healthier fruit, better fruit. And we did a long testing of that to do that work. It was about a 4-year test in a few vines and a few rows, an A/B test. And after that test was complete, we determined that to retrain those vines on that vineyard, we would get healthy vines for another generation. So that's a really important piece of how Long Meadow Ranch looks at long-term growth. And we can do that because we own the land, right? We're stewards of our land, not for 1 year, not for 5 years, but for generations to come.
So you never do the cutting and burning of old growth like you see a lot around Napa at certain times of year. You see them burning the old growth. You don't do that at all there.
Well, we haven't had to so far, which has been great. And that's this was sort of the big first test we had at Long Meadow Ranch, because we were at that 25-year mark, from those first plantings. And so we didn't inherit a vineyard there. So we planted it from the start. And so that was a great first step in that process. And then we saw that process come into play again, most recently in Anderson Valley at one of our vineyards, because we did buy a vineyard and the vines were about 16 years old or so. We converted to organic viticulture immediately, 3-year process. And then after that 3 years, in the 4th year, there was one block of a Chardonnay vineyard that just wasn't producing great. But we didn't need to replant the vineyard. We were able to basically, take off the tops right there and then graft over a new clone. So we were able to do that. And we had about a 95, 96% success rate. And then the following season, they went back in for those final 4%. And so that's an example of, again, what can we do without having to, like you said, rip up a vineyard, burn it, and then also the waiting game, right? If we're the way we're planting, we would have to wait at least 4 years before using fruit, probably 5 or 6, before we feel confident that we want to put a wine like grapes into an estate wine. Those super young vines for our wines, would not fit for us.
It seems like the grafting process that you're talking about would be really labor intensive, because you're talking about hundreds of plants that would need to be grafted.
Yeah, there's I don't know the name of this expert, because I'm blanking, I don't have it jotted down, but there's sort of this great expert in Northern California for this grafting project. And he has an incredible track record and a great team, and they come in, but yeah, it's like surgery, but they're also very fast and very efficient. So it's one team coming in, and we only did one, small block, probably 1 acre. And they do the work over a couple of days. And so, but it's less expensive than replanting a vineyard. Whereas our team will do all the other work and work very closely with not only our winemakers, but our head of agriculture and our vineyard manager. So it's really a team effort. And I think also that team effort at Long Meadow Ranch, our dedication to the land, that stewardship, really comes into play. There's people that are looking out for that, right? The winemaker isn't responsible alone for the health of the vineyard, nor is the vineyard manager alone, nor is the head of agriculture alone. All of them, with our leadership, all look to the same goal, which is creating great fruit for great wine for many, many years. And that's an important part of that. And that goes back to the leadership of that Ted and Chris and Laddie. Laddie runs the farmers markets, but Ted and Chris really have instilled in our team. So this is that old growth orchard from the 1870s and still thriving. And then on the right, the olive mill. And that's where it all begins with the olive making process. This is one of our Scottish Highland bulls. They live up on the mountains up there on that ranch. And our herd of cattle all live out in Tomales in West Marin, right near Tomales Station, just past Hog Island on your way up, just past Nick's Cove, actually, is our ranch there. We can see the size of these guys. These are our big Scottish Highland. We also have some Angus, some Black Angus hybrids with the Scottish Highland. And it's a full grass-fed operation. And this goes also back to the sustainability and the full circle farming. This small ranch is we're sequestering more carbon than we're emitting. We are not commercial ag, right? You think about all the negatives of commercial agriculture and the CO2 emissions. These grazing animals, they work the grass, they help move around, and they activate photosynthesis. And we have restored the watershed here. It's all organically farmed, and it's all under a conservation trust called MALT, Marin Agricultural Land Trust. So when we bought the property, it was in conjunction with the bylaws from MALT for basically agricultural land in perpetuity and being responsible farmers.
And how many head of cattle are there on the property?
It's the largest fold of cattle west of the Rocky Mountains. And as I was once told, asking how many head of cattle is like telling someone how much money you've got.
Yeah, you have a lot.
No, it's less than 1,000 for sure. But it's a nice number. But honestly, all of the production goes to our restaurant and our farmers market, and the retail directly. We actually don't sell to other restaurants or to retailers because we use all of it. So it's not that big in the sense that we haven't outgrown our own demand. In fact, sometimes we'd love to have it, but what's great is we're using everything, right? So unlike a restaurant that just gets to buy what they want to buy and pick and choose, our team says, okay, we have all of this. What are we going to do? So it creates a wonderful collaboration. Same thing with our produce and our vegetables and fruits. Same thing there. We grow it, we use it, right? So it becomes part of the entire, DNA of Long Meadow Ranch. We have this wonderful ability to grow and use what we create. At Long Meadow Ranch, for the cattle operation, we birth and do everything up until harvest. The one thing we don't do is harvesting. It's a very specialized, technique. So we move them at the very, very, very end for that. But that being said, the rest of that is part of our team. And we work closely with a rancher who manages our property and has a great, and we have lamb up there too. And so he runs that operation for us in conjunction with our agriculture team. So it's a really important piece. And it's sort of like behind the scenes piece, but it fits nicely into the who we are at Long Meadow Ranch. I think the thing that people more are likely to see and embrace are, the fruits and vegetables, the bounty of our produce, because at Farmstead, at our restaurant, everything that hits the table, I should say about 80% right now that hits the table are things we've grown, produced, fermented, distilled, etc. And so these are, over 500 varieties of heirloom fruits and vegetables. And this is just an example. Like right now, the Jimmy Nardellos are in full swing, those peppers down at the bottom. These are the Jimmy Nardellos. They're great on the grill. If you see any down in Arizona at your local markets, I would say pick them up. They're not hot at all. They're wonderful with a little brush of olive oil and salt and put them on the grill until they're charred a little bit. They're absolutely wonderful. And you can see there's cucumbers. So this actually was taken last summer, but this is pretty indicative of what's happening right now. Eggplants, peppers, cucumbers, radishes. The restaurant's known as Farmstead at Long Meadow Ranch. And it's our destination for our community. We have our wine tasting in our Logan Ives house with the old home there on the property. We have events, well, not right now in the time of COVID, but we have a cafe, a garden bar. And currently in August 2020, we are fully outdoor dining as dictated by the state guidelines. And we're able to do that. We have which is a wonderful property there. So we have seating for over 150 people outside, which is pretty incredible. And we're very fortunate to have that. And we have these wonderful heritage breeds of chickens for eggs that we use at the restaurant and market. And of course, the bees are so important to agriculture, right? The pollinators. So we use them for pollination, and of course we make amazing honey. And our chefs get to use the honey, and when we have a supply, we sell the jars, and they sell out quite quickly of our honey. But we do get to use it in our fried chicken and some other great recipes. And this is Laddie Hall. Laddie, one of the proprietors, and she still runs the farmers markets at Long Meadow Ranch. This is her happy place. We are part of the Napa Valley, the town of Napa and the town of St. Helena markets, and we have a farmers market stand at Farmstead.
The chef could really cook seasonal dishes just depending on what's available, and can change the menu according to what vegetables you have.
Absolutely, and that's what's really happened over the years. So Long Meadow Ranch, the foundation, of course, is the wine estates. It's sort of the anchor to everything. But 10 years ago, when we opened Farmstead, that became like the face of Long Meadow Ranch for many people, right? As one of the most popular destinations in Napa Valley. And our farming has really grown more efficient and better. Like the quality of the ingredients have always been great, but now the chefs work very closely. And in fact, the farm team kind of rolls into the culinary team. And that's really important because we are our own supplier. So like I said earlier, whatever we grow, we're going to use. We don't have a third party to sell the things we don't want. So that goes back to full circle, right? So if you think about it this way, think about tomatoes. So now we're very strategic in how many heirloom varieties we're planting for the season, and also rotating the planting. So we can actually have a scaled and long season of tomatoes, right? So we want to have a nice long season because we know how great they are. If we planted them all at the same time, we'd have a surge, and then we'd have a deficit, right? So now we're able to space out the planting. And then on top of that, those tomatoes that come in, we've got tomatoes for soups and gazpacho. We've got tomatoes for the heirloom tomato plate. We've got tomatoes for the farmer's market. But if there's tomatoes that come in that are not good for any of those things, even for roasting, anything, we feed those to the chickens. So those chickens are well fed on organic produce. Their eggs taste better for it, right? And then we use their manure for compost again. So that's really the wonderful view of full circle farming in the life of a chicken. If you think about it that way. Yeah. And then with, again, the restaurant benefits. So we can have specials or a 1 week run. If we've got fava beans for 1 or 2 weeks, the chefs know they're coming in. It's not like a farmer shows up with a basket. Look what I've got today. We know what's happening. And so they get to plan for that, and they do. And the culinary team gets out there once a week. They go out and do some harvesting, and it's great for camaraderie. It's great for inspiration to be able to pick what you then cook and grow. It's just amazing. It's great inspiration. Executive chef is Stephen Barber, Kentucky native, and he's been out at our restaurant now for 9 years out of the 10. And it's wonderful. So we have a little Southern bent. And our chef de cuisine is also from Kentucky, Kip Ramsey. And so the leadership of Stephen, along with Kip, is great for our team. Really to have, it's such a happy place to be, and to have that inspiration with your own garden. We have over 9 acres at the Rutherford property, which I'll show you some photos in drone now. And then at Farmstead, there's also a garden, about 1.5 acres of produce just right there on the property. So it's a really unique setting, and we're aware of that, and we want to do the best we can with that. And that's why in Rutherford, where we have our Sauvignon Blanc, and now as we get into wine, we'll talk about Sauvignon Blanc from Rutherford. That was also part of the evolution of Long Meadow Ranch. It's where all our produce, most of the produce is. It's where we have great Cabernet Sauvignon planted, and it's the heart of our Sauvignon Blanc production. So 95-acre ranch. We're on Highway 29. That's facing south right there. And we turn to the east. We have some produce right here in front. That area is where we do our staging. And now we're flying directly over some orchards. This was taken in a dormant time. Right now it's filled with stone fruits. We've got kale and greens and summer squash. And this building here is our chicken palace, the Poulet Palace. And they have this whole area out there to run around. And then we're flying over right here. We're flying over the Cabernet vineyard to the right. And now just as we cross over these trees, that's our Sauvignon Blanc vineyard. Swinging to the north, that's Mount St. Helena out in the background. Our Cabernet vineyard right here in the foreground, and that Chicken Palace in the foreground. And I want to go back one spot to show you something. Right, let me see if I can pause this. Oh, there we go. So if we look here, we're looking back to where we just were. And this is where our home ranch is. So that gives you some perspective of both the proximity, and it's kind of deceiving because the mountains are pretty high behind it, but that property was already at about 900 feet was the winery and 1,200 feet was that vineyard. So it gives you some perspective of where we're at. And it's about a 15-minute drive. And then right here, our neighbors across the street, that's Corkage Hills Wine Estate. We've got BV over here, right? And then we have Alpha Omega over here, a little farther up is Alpha Omega.
Good neighborhood.
Yeah. The Rutherford neighborhood's pretty incredible, right? And also to back here, past BV, you've got the original Inglenook Estate. So Rutherford's a special place for sure. And we love being a part of it. And, when we talk about wine now, and I'll let this phase out, go to the next slide. So we talk about Sauvignon Blanc, we talk about style, we talk about what Long Meadow Ranch is all about with wine. And a theme across all of our wines has to do with freshness, picking on the early side, low to moderate alcohol. Therefore, we keep acidities higher and alcohol a little lower, right? And we want that freshness. We want to have structure. We want the wines to be vibrant and to go with food. And that goes back to being farmers. We want to have a meal with the things we grow and the things we produce. So we want wines that pair that way. So if you think back to the first 10 years at Long Meadow Ranch, our winemaker was Kathy Corison. So Kathy was our first winemaker and really had a very good relationship with Ted Hall. And the two of them both had this desire to make wines like this, wines that sort of harkened back to the 70s in Napa Valley or to the old world in Tuscany and Bordeaux and Saint Julien, where you've got wines that have restraint, that are beautiful now in their youth, but also will age beautifully. And so that was the foundation for Long Meadow Ranch winemaking. And that continued as we went 10 years later and started the Sauvignon Blanc production. And now under the leadership of Ashley Heisey, our VP of winemaking, and the rest of our winemakers that work closely. So Justin Carr, a winemaker in Napa Valley, holds those same things very, very close to his heart. And we pick early. And I mean early, like sometimes 4 or 5 days or even a week before some of our peers. Of course, many producers like us, we pick in the wee hours of the night and the early morning at dawn. We're just finishing harvest. You want to preserve those cool grapes. You don't want them to kind of plump up with sunlight and get plumped up with water. You want them to be tight and small. And that's a big piece of our Sauvignon Blanc. And we actually do 2 picks. We do about 80% of our pick on that early, maybe 5 days before others. And then we do the final pick about a week later, just to get a little more of that richness in there, but without going too high in the alcohols at all. And so we have this really like lime zest freshness in that Sauvignon Blanc. I would think you would agree that zip and that freshness without that sort of grassy, intense, layer. It's got this really, bright citrus piece. There's a couple of blocks that we know could use a little extra time. So we know our vineyard now, right? So it might be an older block or it might be a block that has a certain exposition. So the team will get in there, and if they know that, let's say the north side or the south side, a certain part of the block will be left for that later pick. And the night before, our vineyard team is making those decisions. So when the team gets in there, they know what they're picking. And they've got it down right now, but they typically know a block that's going to be the one for the later pick.
I think that's interesting that just a few days difference makes it between the two.
Absolutely. You know, absolutely. And when we, you know, it's relevant right now, even though we're talking Sauvignon Blanc, but our winemaker for Anderson Valley, Stefan Vivier, we talk about it a lot with the wines there. And he talks about what he learned from his mentors in Burgundy. And I think all of our winemakers would agree, like you get what you get at harvest. And that's it. For a winery that's not doing any augmentation, any added elements, not taking away anything when we get into the winery, our resulting glass of wine, the most important crucial piece is when you pick that grape. Because an extra day of heat or an extra, certain things can change and that resulting wine will change. Absolutely. And so there's risks that winemakers take every day on when they're choosing when to pick. If a heat wave comes in and they want to wait it out, hoping that it will cool off, that can be a great reward, but it's also risky in the process. What if it doesn't cool off and you've got 3 days of heat and then 4 and 5, and then your sugars go up and your alcohol drops, right? So there's all these layers that come in there to, the art of winemaking. But I would say it's the art of like knowing when to pick the grapes and making those decisions. Number one wine in terms of production. It's also our entry level price point because it's Sauvignon Blanc in Napa Valley. But it's the wine that's most widely distributed in part because of those two factors, right? Great price point and a larger production for a small winery. And so we've got global distribution for this wine, which has really helped a lot of customers learn about Long Meadow Ranch through the Sauvignon Blanc, even though we're Napa Valley, Cabernet is our calling card, of course, and in Anderson Valley, it's about Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, but the Sauvignon Blanc, because of that wide distribution globally, has been great for us in that regard. Yeah, and again, to have an estate vineyard, organically grown Sauvignon Blanc at a $25 price point is pretty special. All of our vineyards are certified CCOF, California Certified Organic Farmers. We are not a certified wine because of the way the certification process works. We have not done that or gone down that path. Additionally, in the US, the level of sulfites that we use is dramatically, it's very, very low, but the way the sulfites work for certification also in Europe, it has to be like almost none added. So because we are using them for preservation to globally ship wine, we would not be certified organic wine. But
when you say that you ship it globally, where do you ship it to?
Well, so we, our direct to consumer is US shipping, 42 states, but we have distribution, importers from, the UK to Japan, to South Korea, Germany. Sweden's a great market for us, Norway, Denmark, the Bahamas, a few other markets. Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
So how do they find you? How do all these international?
We are very active in creating global awareness, and we do that in a few ways. In the business to business side of things, we participate with Napa Valley vintners at a lot of festivals around the world, where you're there to meet importers, distributors, and actually getting right to the buyers of retail and restaurant and hotels. And we've been doing that for many years. We committed about 5 years ago to increasing that because we at Long Meadow Ranch really believe that, the global marketplace can drive awareness and in turn can bring global tourism to Napa Valley and to Anderson Valley. It can help all layers of our business. And just like if you're traveling and you're at a great hotel restaurant in New York City or London or Stockholm, and you see these wines, you're bringing awareness, right, to the right audience. So we find that to be a great opportunity for us. So we commit to that because we think it's important. The on-premise world has been shut down in so many places, right? And that if that accounts for about 50% of our 3-tier business, that sort of evaporated, right, overnight due to restaurants being closed. And so that's been the challenge. So we've created webinars and specifically for certain partners, as well as ones open to all trade. So we've done seminars where we've had people attend from Hong Kong, from Tokyo, from Stockholm, London, as well as, you know, Texas, New York, Florida. So we bring them education and content just like this with myself, my colleague who runs global sales, and whoever the relevant winemaker is for that session. So we've done some really micro sessions, one just on the soils of Anderson Valley, and we've done more macro sessions on all of Long Meadow Ranch, so we can stay top of mind and bring a little piece of Long Meadow Ranch to our partners. So up at the winery in Napa Valley, let's go back to the, let me go back up here. So, you know, that left image is where we do, you know, intimate tastings for small groups, private and semi-private. The cave is not a cave for tastings and parties. It's really a very utilitarian cave. And I say that because I've been to a lot of wineries around the world, and I've seen some glorious, you know, entertainment happening. But if you also think about it, and our winemakers are all in line with this, when you're in a cave, it's like being in a, let's say you're in a smokehouse restaurant, and all you smell is that smoke, let's say, of that pit, right? And if you're trying to taste wine in that, you're going to say, oh, it's smoky. Now, if you're at a winery that's damp and got this moisture and it's cool, and these are influencing all of our senses. And so when you actually taste a wine in there, it might be romantic, but it's actually not the best place to judge and critique, especially if you're a winemaker trying to do some tests. So we take our customers back there, show them around, but we do our tastings back in the main area without those outside influences. And I say that part loudly because I've had some wonderful tastings in cellars, don't get me wrong, around the world. But it's a nice way to think about it. And if you look at that bottom shot of the winery that we flew over, gives you some perspective on the scale of it. But also, if you that cave that you look up, that's underneath the hillside, and way in the back of the cave, we are basically under the Merlot vineyard that's up there in the mountain. It's rammed earth architecture. It's an old Inca style. So we used all the earth from the hillside with a little bit like a 5% solution of cement, and that became the structure. Of course, there's steel beams, but that's the majority of the structure is the earth itself from the hillside. So the Cabernet, and that's why I went back to the mountain property. At Long Meadow Ranch, as we talked about, the mountain estate was first, Rutherford was second. When Rutherford came into play in 2005, we now had another source of amazing Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot. And so at that point, we created sort of a differentiation and a couple of new wines. So we created the E.J.Church Reserve Cabernet Sauvignon just from the mountain property, from a selection of the best barrels of Cabernet. That's also where we have a little bit of Sangiovese, we have a little bit of Cabernet Franc up there, and so we have a few isolated wines. So then the Napa Valley Cabernet, which was once only the mountain fruit, now is a blend of our mountain fruit and our Rutherford fruit for a really unique Napa Valley style, where we're able to say, this is our Napa Valley, mountain and Rutherford AVA together. And so we took the same identity of restraint, lower alcohol, structure. In the mountains, you get a little more like woodsy flavors, you get smaller berries, a little tighter. And in the Rutherford, you get this like wonderful, like dusty character, chalkiness from the old riverbed, little riper fruit. So we've got majority mountain fruit, a little less Rutherford to make Long Meadow Ranch, Napa Valley. It's the one that has the best, you know, wine list and retail distribution. The E.J.Church is so tiny. The Sangiovese and Cabernet Franc are just for our wine club. So this Napa Valley Cabernet and its, you know, sister, the Long Meadow Ranch Napa Valley Merlot, those are like the identity for Long Meadow Ranch to the world for Napa Valley. So then the evolution continues at Long Meadow Ranch, and you'll see this theme, right? We keep evolving, and that's great for our team. It's great for everything we're doing. as a company. It helps keep people excited in new projects. So the big new project happened in 2015. So we had 2005 was Rutherford. I mentioned the restaurant opened in 2010. I sort of casually mentioned that. So that happened in 2010. But from the wine estate side, in 2015, we acquired a property in Anderson Valley. This was not a quick, on-the-fly decision. It was thoughtful of how will Long Meadow Ranch grow for generations to come. And this idea of Pinot Noir and Chardonnay in a special area, we knew Napa wasn't the place for that. And Chris Hall, along with Tim, this was really Chris's kind of spearheading of let's get into Anderson Valley where it's the best spot for Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. How do we evolve for the future? How do we do it with land? And because we weren't looking for a winery or a brand, the way many people want to get started, we wanted vineyards. And we didn't want to go into it casually with just slapping a label on and buying some fruit, right? We didn't want to do that. We wanted to create an estate, understanding how important it is, going back to land stewardship, right? We want a place to be ours that we can control our destiny. So we took our time. It was probably a 3-year process, and we found this amazing property in the deep end of Anderson Valley, just outside Philo, 145-acre property, and one huge 67-acre vineyard. And so this flyover, this was done by the vineyard team, so it's not a marketing video, so it's a little bit disjointed, but I think it still gives you a little perspective. But bear with some of the turns as we go through here. So we're all surrounded by these redwood trees. So we're deep in the Anderson Valley. This is Chardonnay on the left of the road and Pinot Noir on the right. And we're approaching the Navarro River, our neighbor, our little spot right here over these hills. And of course, the Navarro River feeds into the Pacific Ocean, just about 7 miles directly there. So a huge marine layer, Pacific marine layer influence here, foggy, cool in the evenings, night. This is where we get our water table from. And it's a big, important piece of the Anderson Valley is this Navarro River. And for us particularly, this is a journey for Pinot Noir for us and Chardonnay with a tiny bit of Pinot Gris. And so now we go up the hill, and this is Chardonnay in the beginning, and we go the next hill, we're still in Chardonnay. We've got 3 soils on this property with really kind of nuanced, subtle differences in the soils. And now we're ending the Chardonnay and going just past these trees, we go into the Pinot Noir as we go up the hill. So the grade is about a 300 feet difference between near the river and up to the top hill. So not huge, but it's more about these different expositions and these 3 soil types that really create the difference. And this property was selling fruit. It wasn't someone's winery. It was a vineyard owned by a family, and they were selling fruit to people like Roederer and Goldeneye, which is part of Duckhorn. So we're still selling just a little bit of fruit to a great small vineyard called Reeve. They still buy some of our fruit, but the rest of the contracts all rolled to Long Meadow Ranch. And we hope to one day build a winery on this property. Off to the right, you can see that's the steeper part of the property where we've got Pinot Noir growing with a little bit of a deeper slope. And this is where we bring a little bit of water from the river for the tiny bit of irrigation we do. We do about 20% of the irrigation that we would be allowed to do. To give you perspective here, so this border is all Anderson Valley. And so if you were driving up Highway 101 north of Healdsburg, another 45 minutes or so, that's how far we are from Healdsburg. So you drive up, you get off Cloverdale, you drive through the windy road, and you end up going through Boonville, and then you keep going through, and this is the way, of course, to Mendocino and the Pacific. And we are right here, and the Navarro River basically runs along the same path as the highway. And these 2 shots are the embodiment of the microclimates and the terroir of Anderson Valley. Because you've got the left image shows that fog rolling in, this marine layer, cooling things off, wonderful for Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, right? Because we want a longer season, we want coolness. If it's too hot, we couldn't grow Pinot Noir like this in Napa Valley. Carneros is a cooler area, of course, so that is part of Napa, but I'm saying for we at Long Meadow Ranch, we don't have that opportunity. And yes, Carneros is similar in temperature, but we've got more of this fog influence, and the proximity to the Pacific is really special. And on the right, something also that Carneros doesn't have, this is the redwood trees. So these old growth redwood trees, the difference with the soil in this area is it's cooler soil. So the soil itself, forget the temperature out there, the soil itself is cooler. Redwoods thrive in this area. What that does for the grapes is it allows for a little more energy, a little more spice, if you pick to preserve that. And that's our style of winemaking is, let's hold on to that energy. Let's hold on to that spice, that freshness by picking on the earlier side and not pushing it too far. This is another great shot, just taken on May 30th this year. And this shows the life in the vineyard of our organic viticulture and organic farming. Other projects that are happening, not so much acquisitions, but we actually are in the process of our final permitting for a hotel at Farmstead. So the lodge at Farmstead at Long Meadow Ranch will be a 65-room lodge. That's the plan. It could get tweaked slightly with permitting, but we're in the final stages of that. So that'll be really another component of our destination at Long Meadow Ranch, to have the full immersive experience where you can come to Long Meadow Ranch, you can taste wines, you can have food experiences, you can stay at our property, visit our different wineries, and that's a wonderful and exciting opportunity.
So then that would work well with your weddings and events.
It sure would. You know, the property at Farmstead right now has been wonderful for weddings and events, but it will open up even more opportunities for us. That's absolutely certain. And it will really help the culinary program evolve. We talked about this idea of new projects creating enthusiasm and inspiration for people. So if we have another dining opportunity, let's say a higher level cuisine or a different spin on our farm to the table, then we're really opening up the culinary team's opportunities, right? It's great. We do our more baking and charcuterie and things like that. Chris Hall, our proprietor, in one seat, Stefan Vivier in the front driving, I'm in one seat, and we're taking samples of some grapes in a few different rows of Pinot Noir. And we're doing that for a final chemistry test and a final taste test, because Stefan was feeling there was a little bit of heat that we thought would not hold, but it did, it stayed. And he said he wanted to hold back harvest by one day, but he wanted to double check and triple check. So the two checks were taste the grapes and then do a chemistry test on the alcohol and the sugars. So we went through the vineyard about midnight, tested the grapes, and then in the morning, at 4 a.m, he took them to the lab to do an extra test. And he texted the picking team and said, one more day. And because we're earlier than everyone else, our picking team, as well as the contract guys that help out, we were able to do that because no one else is picking that early. So that was a really good kind of lesson for us. And we knew that already, but it's a good anecdote of, if you can control and you pick early and you've got all these tools in your toolbox, you can do that. You can hold off harvest a day. If that's not your vineyard that you own, or you've got a contract out and you've picked that date, you're stuck with it. The Pinot Noir Rosé is a big part of the journey of Pinot Noir at Long Meadow Ranch. The important piece about that Rosé is between 70 and 80% are direct press from a dedicated block of a Rosé vineyard just for that. This is not a second project. It's specifically dedicated to Rosé. It's an earlier ripening clone. It's almost like a sparkling clone. It earlier ripens, has high acidity, has great energy. That resulting wine, you taste it. You taste this wonderful like life to the wine. And that's because of that block that we do. And then 20%, about 25 to 27% in the 18 and 20% in the 19 vintage is Saignée, just a little bit of a bleed off. But it's all about that direct press, that fresh strawberry peach component that brings the life to this wine. Okay, I just have some Farmstead shots. Cafe, which is also now part of our dining room. We've transformed this into a dining room as well, outdoor dining. And that's where we do our tastings and have our general store. And of course, events. can be as big as that, or they can be small and intimate. And I'll just throw you this quick flyover to give you some more perspective. Yeah, so this is just a quick little shot that the Chamber of Commerce created for us. Just gives you a little snapshot into a little bit of life at Farmstead in about 30 seconds. But I think this shot right here shows it, right? That's that garden I was talking about. And then we go back to the general store where tastings occur, and a little bit of the life at Farmstead at Long Meadow Ranch.
In your philanthropy page on the website, we're talking about corkage for the community. What a huge amount of corks and money that was made through that effort. It was donated through that effort.
Yeah, it's a really special program. It's at the heart of Long Meadow Ranch and community. And when Farmstead was created, it was Chris Hall that came up with that concept. People get so worried about people bringing in wine, and rightly so. It's a revenue stream for restaurants when people bring, when they buy wine. But for us, we thought, what if we turn the tables a little bit? People, they don't take advantage of it. It's not something that's, it's not something that we're so worried about. And in fact, we can give back to the community. So we let local charity, local organizations submit online a form, and we've got a great queue lined up of organizations. And every month, these small organizations are getting a check. So that check could be $2,000, $3,000. That is vital to their existence. So we just upped it from $5 to $10 just 2 months ago on our 10th anniversary, because we felt that that's still quite reasonable, and we could do even more. But it's an important piece to give back. And I think Farmstead really embodies that. The local community love going to Farmstead. It's a place that feels like home for a lot of people. So to be able to give to local organizations is great. The Long Meadow Ranch Corral Club, as we call it, has 3 tiers: Arcana, the Appaloosa, and the Highland, in order of staging up. And basically, the biggest difference is a few extra benefits as you go up the ladder. You get more wine, of course, but the Highland, you get 2 nights at our chef's cabin, which is a pretty cool thing.
Ask you about the chef's cabin. Is that?
Yeah.
Don't have that.
Yeah, I'm gonna.
I saw the chef's cabin. I want to go to the chef's cabin.
Totally. Let me show you a photo of that chef's cabin real quick. It's up at the mountain estate off to the side, just past one of the olive groves, and you go back and there's this 1-bedroom cottage, and then you've got this view of that valley. You're about 900 feet above the valley floor, and you've got a little table out front as well. And so we have guest chefs will stay there when they come visit, and our Highland Club members get to stay 2 nights a year, which is pretty awesome. And it's wonderful. Yeah, it's a really cool thing. And then the other thing is access to these wines. All of the club members at any level get access to these tiny production wines. So we've got in Napa Valley, that means you get access to the Cabernet Franc, for example, and the Sangiovese. We make like 170 cases of Cabernet Franc and like 200 cases of Sangiovese. That's pretty cool. And we get access to our most limited production olive oil, the Limonata, and the Prato Lungo. This year we'll release them all, but club members will get early access because they might sell out that quickly. So that's another cool thing. And the other cool thing is for all the club members, you can gift your benefits to a friend or family. You could even gift a shipment to them. So for example, especially nowadays with destination travel being limited, if you live in Arizona and you're a member and you've got friends that live in the Bay Area, they can go for day trips up to Napa. But in Arizona, you might not fly to California this year. So you can gift your tasting experiences up to the winery or their store to your friends. So they come up on your membership and get that benefit. But one of the biggest reasons people leave wine clubs is they have too much wine, right? They're not going through it fast enough. So one thing that we've had a lot of success with is when members are given the opportunity to pass on a shipment. It could be to a client, their child, their parents, a gift to someone, a thank you gift to someone, and they just pass it on. We put a gift message in, and it goes to someone else.